Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of Digital Fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and we are back at it with spoiler season for Magic the Gathering's Edge of Eternity's expansion. Now, if you didn't catch it, I did put up a video earlier today because there was another leak, and I wanted to handle all of those leaked spoilers in a separate video all by itself. So this video is all of the official spoiled cards for Day 2 of spoiler season. That's Wednesday, July 9th. So after this video, you should be caught up with absolutely everything that's been spoiled up to this point. And if you haven't seen any of my leaked spoiler videos, I highly encourage you guys to check those out. I have a playlist that all of my spoiler videos are in, and that's in the description and in a pinned comment. So check that out to get caught up on everything. But we're going to dive right in. Before we do, please like the video. It helps me get out the video to so many more people. It helps the channel to grow, and I appreciate it more than I can possibly express with words. And be sure to subscribe, because we're going to stay on top of spoiler content and get it all out to you as soon as we absolutely can. Humanly possible get it out to you. So let's do the thing and dive right in. First of all, we've got Magus of the Moon. This is one of the special guest cards. Just wanted to show you guys a couple of the special guests really quick at the start of this, and then we can dig into the meat and potatoes of the standard legal cards. This is a 2/2 human wizard for 1 red and 2, and while it's on the battlefield, non-basic lands are mountains. Very cool card with a very cool treatment. Next up, we also have Nexus of Fate. Thank God this is a special guest card and not coming back to standard, because I would lose my mind and pull my hair out of my head. This is 2 blue and 5. You take an extra turn after this one, except you also put it into your library, shuffled into your library instead of into your graveyard after you cast it, which means there were a bunch of combo decks back in the day when this was standard legal, where you would just keep drawing into the Nexus of Fate and recasting it, and it was obnoxious, and I never want to go back to those days. But still really cool to see this as a bonus sheet card. Just very grateful it's not in standard. And then the last one here is Paradox Haze, an enchantment aura for 1 blue and 2. Enchants a player, and at the beginning of enchanted player's first upkeep each turn, that player gets an additional upkeep step after this step. Really cool card with a really cool treatment. But let's move on to the standard legal spoilers. First off, we're gonna start with the commons, but the commons are honestly looking kind of crazy today. This is Hull Carver, a 1/1 death-touching artifact creature robot assassin for just 1 black mana. It seems like all of the commons these days are kind of pushed, and they're all completely and utterly playable and limited, which I sort of love. It being a 1/1 death touch for 1 is going to keep a whole bunch of stuff at bay and limited, but it's also an artifact, and that's absolutely going to matter in this set, and I think it's going to matter a lot more than people have caught on to already. So pretty cool card. Next up, we've got Ilvoy Galeblade, which is also a really good common. A 1/1 jellyfish warrior for 1 blue mana. It has flash, it has flying, and as if that wasn't enough, you can pay 2 mana and sack it to draw a card. This just seems awesome. You can hold up interaction, and if you don't need to use the interaction, just flash out the Galeblade, swing in for a little incidental damage every single turn in the air, 1 damage, tick away at your opponent's life total, and then later on in the game, when it's outlived its usefulness and there are much bigger threats on the board, especially if your opponent has a big flying blocker, you can just get rid of it and replace it with a new card. Everything about this seems really, really good for a common. Commons are just so much more pushed these days than they used to be, and I think part of that has to do with the new play boosters that they've been using for the last handful of sets rather than just draft boosters. They kind of reorganized the way they handle commons and uncommons, and it just kind of seems like there's no such thing as an unplayable common anymore, which is a good thing in certain cases and also kind of an annoying thing in others if you're someone like me who spent a lot of time getting really good at limited only to realize that now it's really hard to not be good at limited. Anyway, we're going to move on. Next up, we've got Nutrient Block. I think this is the last common of today. Just a 1 mana artifact food that has indestructible. You can sacrifice it and pay 2 to gain 3 life, but also when it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you get to draw a card. Kind of an interesting card. If you turn it into a creature with some of the cards that turn artifacts into creatures in this set, it keeps the indestructible, which is really cool. But also there are a bunch of cards we've already seen in this set that care about sacrificing artifacts. So if you're using them, synergizing those types of cards with this, you get extra value that when you sack this for whatever value you're getting off the sack payoff, you're also just drawing a card. So I like that there's a bunch of different ways you can use this. It's not just meant to fit into one specific archetype, but it's got enough stuff on it that can pivot and be used in different ways. And even if you don't draw any of your interesting ways to interact with this, you can still always just sack it to gain 3 life, help win the race against aggro. I think overall this is a really interesting card. But we're going to move on to the uncommons. First up, we've got the one card that I missed yesterday, and that's Unravel. An instant for 2 blue and 1, counter target spell. If the amount of mana spent to cast this spell was less than its mana value, you draw a card. This card seems awesome to me. 3 mana counter spells are a little bit expensive for today's standard MTG, but being able to draw a card anytime you counter something that someone's somewhat cheating into play, basically any card you would want to play with Up the Beanstalk, then has a downside that lets your opponent draw a card if they counter this with Unravel, which is kind of awesome. You can sort of take advantage of people trying to cheat out things for less mana. Stuff like Leyline Binding, which I think is rotating, so probably won't matter in Standard, but there's still plenty of other cards that use that kind of tactic and get you to play them for less mana than they actually cost. There's a lot of that going around in Standard right now, so I think a counterspell like this could actually have a chance of being really, really good. If you're consistently drawing a card while you're countering, that's absolutely worth 3 mana, so be really interesting to see where this one lands. Next up, we've got Tapestry Warden. This is one that we saw in one of the leaked videos a little bit earlier in the week. This is a 3/4 artifact creature robot soldier with vigilance for 4 mana, 1 green and 3. It makes it so that each creature you control with toughness more than its power is going to assign combat damage with its toughness instead, and also going to station any kind of spacecraft or permanents that require stationing with its toughness rather than its power as well, which works for the Tapestry Warden here, so it kind of feels like a 4/4 vigilance rather than a 3/4 vigilance. But this just gives me hope that a toughness matters deck is going to be relevant again in Standard when this set rotates in. I'm hoping so, because I think that would be a really fun deck to brew. There is a bunch of synergy for a deck like that already in Standard. It just hasn't quite gotten to the point where it's good enough to really be a contender in the meta. But it could maybe, and this could be a part of making it work that way. I'm also really interested to see if this ends up being some kind of a relevant archetype in Limited. I hope so, because that's always a fun way to draft when this is something that works in the Limited format. But we're going to move on. Next up, we've got Systems Override, 1 red and 2 for a sorcery. You gain control of target artifact or creature until end of turn. Untap that permanent. It gains haste until end of turn. If it's a spacecraft, you put 10 charge counters on it. If you do, remove 10 charge counters from it at the beginning of the next end step. This is such an interesting variation of Threaten. Not only can you just use it as a normal Threaten effect for a normal cost for a Threaten effect, but if you just hit a spacecraft, you're turning on something that maybe they're super far away from turning on, and then you're just taking all those charge counters off so that they're not able to get the value. They're not able to keep the charge counters and turn it into a spacecraft themselves, which is really, really cool. And because a lot of the spacecraft, especially the ones that require as many as 10 charge counters, are super huge and have really relevant attacks abilities sometimes, this could end up being really, really insane if you use it just right. Another thing I want to point out is that if you use this card while you have All Will Be One on the battlefield, you just do 10 damage to whatever you want because you immediately add 10 charge counters. That seems insane to me. Granted, All Will Be One is rotating out of Standard, which I'm kind of bummed about, but it's worth it to get rid of Sunfall, so hallelujah. Anyway, we're going to move on. Next up, we've got Broodguard Elite. This is actually one that was in my leaked video from earlier today that actually ended up getting posted as an official spoiler the same day, which is kind of ironic, but it's the only card that's an official spoiler that was also a part of that earlier leaked video, so it is what it is. This is a 0/0 Insect Knight for 2 green and X. It enters with X +1/+1 counters. When it leaves the battlefield, you put all of its counters on target creature you control. That's not just its +1/+1 counters, all of its counters. So if you end up, I don't know, putting like lifelink and death touch counters on this guy, those will actually move and be put on another creature when it leaves as well, which is kind of cool. You can also warp it for 1 green and X. And this is one of the warp creatures that's almost always worth warping instead of just hard casting first. Because say you got 4 mana, you do this for warp X being, 3, and you get to put those 3 counters on something at the end of your turn when it gets exiled. And then you still get to play it as the normal card later. So it's just sort of a free way to get +1/+1 counters on whatever you want. You can kind of think of it as a sorcery that just says 1 green and X, put X +1/+1 counters on a creature, except it has a huge upside in that however big it is as a body that turn, you can also use the body to station your spacecraft before it gets exiled, and that's just actual extra value that's kind of free tacked onto the card. And it automatically gives you the creature itself that you can cast from exile later, sort of like an adventure creature. So when you really think about it like that, there's just a ton of value in this card, and I think it's actually going to be really, really good. Definitely in limited, but maybe even in constructed. Next up, we've got Debris Field Crusher. This is a 1/5 artifact spacecraft for 1 red and 4. When it enters, it deals 3 damage to any target, and then when it stations up to 8+ charge counters, it becomes the 1/5 flyer with the ability to buff it +2 power with every 2 mana that you pump into it. I actually really like this card. It is a bit overcosted when you're paying 5 mana to do 3 damage and remove something, but still, in limited, having more incidental removal that can be value later on, especially in the form of a flying evasive creature that you're going to be able to dump your extra mana into to do even more damage. This could be a win condition later on pretty easily in limited, while also being a removal piece. And even if you don't end up stationing up to 8+, there's other things you can do with artifacts. So even if you're just killing their thing, and then, sacrificing this for value, or turning it into a creature with 𝑇𝑒𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑛𝑐𝑒, or whatever the case may be, there's just a lot you can do with this. I think people are going to overlook just how beneficial just something being an artifact is, in addition to all of the things that it actually does, and there's definitely some value to be had there. One last thing I want to point out about this card that's really cool, that's easy to overlook, is if you get your opponent down to 3 or less life, you can just play it and just do 3 damage to their face and kill them. You're not usually going to want to use this to damage their face, but you can, because it deals 3 damage to any target. So there's a lot of versatility here. It is a little overcosted if you think of it just in the form of removal, but when you think about all the different ways it can get value, I actually think it might end up being worth it and end up being a really good card for limited. Next up, we've got Mouth of the Storm, a 6/6 elemental with flying and ward 2 for 1 blue and 6, which is a lot of mana. I'm not going to lie, it's a lot of mana. But when this creature enters, creatures your opponents control get -3/-0 until your next turn. It's important to note that it's until your next turn. So even if you can't use this offensively, they're still going to all get the -3/-0 on your opponent's next turn when they're going to be swinging in. So even just to sort of stave off aggro by giving yourself 1 big blocker and nerfing their whole team for the next turn, it could end up being good. 7 mana is a lot. So I'm a little bit mixed on this card, but I do want to point out the fact that there's a ton of ramp in this set, and there are a ton of lander tokens all over the place. So like I've said about every expensive card, I think this 7 mana is going to feel a lot closer to 6 or maybe even like 5.5 when you're actually playing and curving out, because there's just so much ramp in this set that I think on average that's going to typically be what it feels like. I don't think it's going to feel like a normal 7 drop just because of the format and the environment that the card ends up being in. But let's move on. Next up, we've got Terrapacked Intimidator, and I'm pretty sure this is the last uncommon of the day. This is a 2/1 Kavu's Scout for 1 red and 1, so it's a 2-drop 2/1. But when it enters, target opponent may have you create 2 lander tokens. If they don't, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on this creature. I think this guy is absolutely cracked. 2 mana for a 4/3 is insane. absolutely insane. And the only other option is they let you get 3 pieces of board presence on the board for only 2 mana. A 2/1 that can functionally trade decently well with other 2-drops, plus you get 2 lander tokens. And whether or not you're actually sacrificing them to ramp so that you can drop your big bombs, or finding your splash colors so that you can play stuff you otherwise couldn't play, or maybe you're just saving them to turn into creatures with Tezzeret or some other card that does that. There's so many ways to use those lander tokens. We've already seen a bunch of things in this set that allow you to sacrifice artifacts for value, things that care about how many artifacts you have. There's just so many ways in which those 2 lander tokens can matter that I think no matter what, this guy is just insane value. It really doesn't matter which option your opponent picks. And I kind of love that about it. This is just, man, this card is so cool. I can't wait to draft it. Is it good enough for Standard? Maybe. If there is a deck that is super aggressive where it actually matters that this is a 4/3 for 2, but at the same time is going to try to go super wide with artifacts to get value while not losing steam being an aggro deck, if you can carefully, successfully sort of cross, hybrid, synergize those 2 type of play styles, then this could be an amazing card for a Standard deck. But you're gonna need both modes to matter to a huge degree in whatever deck runs it in order for this to end up being good enough. So jury's still out, but the potential is absolutely there. Next up, we've got a whole bunch of bonus sheet cards. This is the Stellar Sights bonus sheet. We're just going to briefly go over these. These aren't standard legal, but these are cards that you can pull in your packs, and they will be legal in Limited. We're just going to go over these really quick before we get into the rares and mythics today. First up, we have Contested Warzone, a land that taps for 1 colorless mana. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, that creature's controller gains control of this land, and you can also pay 1 mana, tap it. Attacking creatures get +1/+0 until end of turn. Next up, we've got Scavenger Grounds, a land desert that taps for 1 colorless mana. You can also pay 2 mana, tap it, sacrifice a desert to exile all graveyards. Next up, we've got Endless Sands, another land desert that you can tap for colorless mana. It also has 2 activated abilities. One where you pay 2, tap it, exile a creature you control. Another one where you pay 4, tap it, sack the land, return each creature card exiled with this land to the battlefield under its owner's control. This actually works really well with warp creatures, so it should be super fun and Limited if you manage to pull this. Like, warp something in, and then just exile it with this. Warp something in, and then just exile this. Eventually, you just pay 4 mana. You get all of those warp creatures back all at once. I think that'll be super fun. Next up, we've got Inventors Fair, a legendary land that taps for 1 colorless mana. Are you seeing a trend? All of these Stellar Sights land tap, they all tap for 1 colorless mana, which is, I think, the entire point of the bonus sheet. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more artifacts, you gain 1 life, which is actually relevant in Limited for this set. You can also pay 4 mana, tap it, sacrifice the Inventors Fair, search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. Activate only if you control 3 or more artifacts. I think this is super, super relevant for Limited. It can find you your big bomb pretty easy in a format that's going to have a whole bunch of artifacts. So I'm excited to hopefully pull one of these in one of the drafts that I do. Next up, we've got Petrified Field, another land that taps for a colorless mana. You can tap it and sacrifice it, return target land from your graveyard to your hand, which is also kind of interesting. Next up, we've got Cascading Cataracts, and you can notice that the border here, the like what looks like the galaxy map border, is actually more of a golden color than the rest of the cards, which is kind of interesting. I'm not sure if that maybe denotes some kind of a rarity change or what the case is there. But I'm curious to find out why that is. This is a land that has Indestructible, taps for a colorless. You can also pay 5 and tap it to add 5 mana in any combination of colors. This might actually make the 5-color spacecraft that we saw in a previous video playable and Limited. Maybe, probably not, but maybe it'll be interesting to see. I mean, it'll be playable and Limited. You just need a whole bunch of lander tokens, right? And then the last one here is Power Depot with what looks like the Death Star in the background. Very cool. This is an artifact land that enters tapped, taps for a colorless mana. You can also tap it to add 1 mana of any color, but spend this mana only to cast artifact spells or activate abilities of artifacts. And then it also has modular 1, so it's just got a +1/+1 counter on it, and if the land somehow dies, you get to put it on one of your artifact creatures. Pretty cool land. But we're going to move on to the meat and potatoes, the juicy stuff that all of you guys have been waiting for, and that's today's rares and mythics. First up, we've got Consult the Star Charts, which is another card that was spoiled early, leaked early in one of my leak videos. Check out those videos for sure, because there are a ton of crazy cards in those videos that haven't officially been spoiled yet, and this set is just looking insane. So just to remind you guys, there is a playlist with all of those videos in it, every single spoiler that's come out so far, even the leaks. You can check that out in the description or in the pinned comment. This one is Consult the Star Charts, 1 blue and 1 for an instant. You look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of lands you control, put 1 of them into your hand, but you can also kick it for 2 mana, and if you do, you get to put 2 into your hand. This card is just nuts. It reminds me a little bit of Pillage the Bog, right? You don't get to plot it and then play it for free later. Instead, you can play it for even more mana later, but you could potentially get 2 cards instead of 1, and most importantly, it's at instant speed, and it's in blue, which means you're holding up interaction, you're holding up instant speed creature removal and counter spells and all that stuff, and then if you don't need to, you just play this, and you get all of your best cards into your hand, and you just overwhelm your opponent. I think this card is going to be a premier piece of card draw for control decks in the new standard, and it just looks insane. I mentioned all of this in one of the last leak videos that we first saw this guy in, but for any of you that haven't seen those leak videos, I want to make sure and cover the bases. So I think this card is nuts, and it's definitely going to be a staple. Next up, we've got Maker Gunship, and this card's looking kind of insane. A 4/3 artifact spacecraft for 1 red and 2. It has to be stationed up to 6+ charge counters in order to become that 4/3 creature, and it also gains flying when you do. But even before that, when this spacecraft enters, it deals damage equal to the number of artifacts you control to target creature and opponent controls. This just seems crazy in a Similacrum Synthesizer deck, right? It's a 3-drop artifact, so it triggers your Synthesizer and gives you another token, but it also does a ton of damage and kills whatever creature on the opposing side you need to, because in that deck you're going super wide with artifacts, right? So this kind of just does everything. This is the better form of spacecraft removal compared to the uncommon that we saw earlier in the video. And I actually think this card is going to be very competitive and in a lot of decks. It's obviously best used in Similacrum Synthesizer because it's as cheap as you can get with removal while still triggering the Synthesizer. But even in other types of artifact decks that I'm almost positive will crop up after this set rotates in, it's just a really, really good piece of removal that can basically kill whatever you need to kill in the right deck, in any kind of artifact deck, and then give you this extra value you can use later on, even if you don't necessarily get to, you know, stationing this super early. Maybe it's something you just do a little bit later in the game, or maybe you don't do it at all. Maybe you just sacrifice this thing to like a bargain card, like a Beseech the Mirror, or something like that. There's, like I said before, it's so many different ways to use artifacts. Once this set comes into standard, I think this card is going to be one of the better cards that you're going to see all over the place as soon as rotation happens. But next up, we've got Alpha Rael Stone Chosen. This is actually a card that was spoiled yesterday, but I was hoping we'd get a better quality image, so I didn't put it into yesterday's video, and we still haven't got a better quality image out, and I don't want to wait any longer. I want to make sure you guys know about this card. This is actually one of the cards that you can get as like a pre-order bonus on MTG Arena if you get one of the bundles. And it's actually looking kind of crazy. This is the first Mythic today. A 3/3 legendary human cleric for 5 mana, 2 black and 3. It has Ward, discard a card at random. This is the first time in a long time that we've seen random discard. Normally, that's not what people do. That is not what Wizards wants to do for discard. They learned their lesson with Hymn to Torok way back in the day. That card was way too good. And we actually have a discard at random here. Oh, sorry. My allergies. So, I just think that's crazy. Even before we get to the rest of the card, discarding a card at random is nuts. Your opponent is never going to want to kill this thing. They're going to be so scared that they're going to discard the best card of their hand. They're always going to think twice or think 3 times before they target this. I just think that's super interesting design space, and I'm really excited to see how good this actually ends up being. I feel like it can play into a lot of psychology with your opponent, messing with their head, and maybe they should have gotten rid of this a long time ago, but they didn't because they're so scared of that random discard. It'll be really interesting to see where it lands. But the second ability is what makes this guy really cool. It's a void ability. Whenever 𝛼𝑟𝑎𝑛 attacks, if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn or a spell was warped this turn, defending player loses half their life, rounded up. So it's kind of like the slasher, except it doesn't have to do combat damage. They lose half their life just by this thing attacking, which is crazy. It doesn't even matter if they block, it doesn't matter if they kill it, it's nuts. And if they want to prevent it from attacking, they have to discard a card at random to target it, which is also nuts. The more you think about this card, the crazier it gets, and it's super easy to turn on that void. Any non-land permanent leaving, whether it's yours or your opponent's, is going to trigger it. So it's great in a sacrifice deck, it's great in a pseudo-control deck that has just a ton of targeted removal. Just kill something on their side, trigger the void, swing in. It's also good with any warped creatures at all, even if it's something that your opponent warps. And we don't really know if there are any creatures that can warp at instant speed during an opponent's turn yet, but theoretically, if those exist, if your opponent warped something on your turn, it would actually turn on your void, which is really interesting. I think this guy has a ton of potential, and I'm super excited to mess around with him. The ward discard a card at random is just really caught me by surprise, and I cannot wait to see how relevant that actually ends up being. But let's move on. Next up, we've got Dawnsire's Sunstar Dreadnought. This is another one that was leaked early, but I'll cover it really quickly here for anyone that hasn't seen my leak videos. This is a spacecraft that costs 5 colorless mana. It stations, and when it gets to station 10 plus charge counters, it turns on this ability. It doesn't become a creature yet, but it turns on this ability whenever you attack. Dawnsire deals 100 damage to up to 1 target creature or planeswalker, which gets even better if you're using something like Fear of Missing Out that gives you extra combat steps, because for each combat step, it doesn't even matter what you attack with. As long as you attack with something, you trigger this and do 100 damage to any creature or planeswalker. And if you turn one of your creatures into a stuffy doll with one of the spoiled cards we saw a couple days ago, you can just kill your opponent outright by doing 100 damage to their head, which sounds really awesome. But then it gets even crazier, because if you station this thing up to 20 plus counters, it becomes a 20/20 flyer, and as long as this thing was already on the battlefield for at least 1 full turn cycle, it doesn't even have summoning sickness. So you just dodge creature removal forever, get this thing up to like 17 or 18 counters, and it's still not a creature. Your opponent can't use a creature removal to kill it, and then you wait for an opening when they're tapped out. You just jam a creature, tap it to put a couple extra charge counters on, and immediately swing in with 20 damage in the air that they couldn't kill with creature removal prior because it wasn't quite a creature yet. I love everything about that. I think this is going to be a really fun card to build around. I'm not going to dwell too much longer on this card because we have talked about it in one of the past videos, but I do think this card is really, really awesome, and I'm super excited to brew with it. Next up, we've got Kavaron, Memorial World. This is the red planet from the Mythic land cycle. There's going to be 1 of these lands in each color. This is the red one. We've already seen, the blue one, the black one, and we got an early leak of the green one. This is the red one. It enters tapped, it taps for a red mana, and it has that station ability. Doesn't become a creature though. When it stations up to 12 plus counters, it turns on this ability to pay 2 mana, tap and sacrifice a land, create a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token, and then creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. This ability sort of reminds me a lot of, what was that guy's name? Imodane's Recruiter, I think was the name of it. The adventure guy from Wilds of Eldraine, where he's like a 2/2, but when you play him, he pumps up your whole team +1 power and gives everything haste. Well, now you have a land that can just do that every turn for 2 mana, as long as you're willing to sacrifice a land to do it. But sacrificing the land gives you something to replace that land as well. It gives you another 2/2, which also gets the +1/+0 buff and the haste. So This just seems like an insane way to alpha strike and close out games a little bit later on. You just tap everything, get this stationed up to 12, and then just start going ham every single turn after that. Not only does it give the 2/2 that it makes haste, but anything else you end up playing that turn with the rest of your mana is also going to get haste and buffed. This seems like an insane card, honestly. I don't know if it quite makes the cut in like a mono red aggro, because I think mono red aggro decks want to kill you before they get to the point where this thing has 12 plus charge counters, and they're also not necessarily going to want to run a tapped land to slow them down in the early game. They just want to kill you as soon as possible. So I don't think this is the kind of card that goes in that deck, but I do think there's probably going to be like some kind of a 2-color aggro-ish or maybe mid-range-ish deck that can use this and then just sort of come out of nowhere and all of a sudden alpha strike for way more than the opponent realizes and just win the game outright. I think there are a lot of cool options. It's also worth noting it's creating an artifact token every time you use it, so that could be relevant. Maybe there's like an artifact aggro deck. I'm hoping so, because we've seen some cards that sort of tilt in the direction already of wanting you to go wide with artifacts, but also wanting to be in a aggro deck. So if a deck like that ends up existing, this could be a really good inclusion to a deck like that. But we're going to have to wait and see when the entire set is spoiled before we know how good this actually is. So let's move on. Next up, we've got Cosmo Grand Zenith. This is another one that leaked early that we already covered, but I think this card is great. A 2/4 for 1 white and 2. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you either get 2 1/1 creature tokens, or you put a +1/+1 counter on every creature you control. This feels to me like a fixed Core Steel Cutter. It costs 1 more mana than Core Steel. You don't get any of the evasion or haste that comes with Core Steel, but you get versatility. Instead of creating 1 token, you create 2 when you second spell, and you get the versatility there of putting charge counters, or rather +1/+1 counters, on every single creature that you have, if it's time to just buff up the huge team you already built and try to close out the game. So I do like this card a lot. It is very versatile. It can do a lot, especially for like aggressive mid-range style decks. This one's absolutely going to be worth experimenting with. I think some people are going to see this and think it's a little bit too expensive for what it does, but I think it's going to be gas in just the right deck. We're going to have to wait and see, but if you have ideas about how we should brew around a card like this, definitely let me know in the comments. The fact that it's the fact that it's a human, I think, is going to be very relevant. I do have a human deck that I'm super stoked about that I think only gets better with this set, so looking forward to that. But next up, we've got another brand new Mythic. This is Adagia Windswept Bastion, and this is the last of the Mythic land cycle I was talking about that we haven't seen yet. One of them was just a leak, I believe, and not officially spoiled. Or was it officially spoiled? Now I'm starting to lose track. The green one that's basically a Gaia's Cradle, I think was only leaked and not officially spoiled. It might have been officially spoiled, though. Either way, this is the last one that we've seen if you include the leaks. This is Adagia Windswept Bastion, a land planet that enters tapped, taps for 1 white mana, and has the station ability. If it gets to 12 plus charge counters, it gains the ability to pay 1 white and 3, tap it, create a token that's a copy of target artifact or enchantment you control, except it's legendary, activate only as a sorcery. This card is nuts, guys. I think people are going to sleep on just how crazy this card is. First of all, it's worth pointing out, it doesn't matter how many copies of the artifact or enchantment you already have that you make. The new one that you make with Adagia is the only one that's legendary. So there aren't going to be any sacrificing unless you're trying to make a copy of an artifact or enchantment that's already legendary. The reason that it makes it legendary is so that you can't make a copy of the same artifact or enchantment more than once. So every turn you can make a copy of something, but you can only make a copy of one thing before you have to move on and find a new target to make a copy of. That's basically what this means. I don't think that matters. In Similacrum Synthesizer decks, you can copy a Synthesizer, which then triggers the original Synthesizer. Not to mention the new Synthesizer is a token, and there's plenty of ways in Standard of making copies specifically of tokens, like Caretaker's Talent could then make a copy of the Synthesizer token, which I guess would also be legendary and be sacrificed because it would copy the legendary token. But even if you did sacrifice it, you would still make a huge creature in the process, and you could kind of do that every turn, which seems kind of crazy. And speaking of Caretaker's Talent, you could just use this to make a copy of Caretaker's Talent, which would also kind of be insane. Yeah, just there's so many good targets. There's so many good targets. You guys are going to have to let me know in the comments what you think the best targets for a card like this are, because there's like a billion. There's like so many ridiculous things you can hit with this that are highly relevant. And going back to the Similacrum Synthesizer example, even if you've already made a Synthesizer and you don't really want to make another one, you know, because of the legendary clause there, you can still just move on and make a copy of one of your other millions of 3-drop artifacts that deck runs, so that you trigger the Synthesizer again and get even more value onto the boards. So I think this is going to do an awful lot. I think this is going to be a staple in a lot of decks. I'm actually tempted to say this might be the best of the cycle. It's really hard to say when you have one that's basically a 𝐼𝐻𝐻𝐾𝐑 and one that's basically a 𝔼𝔻𝔼ℝ Academy. Those could easily be the best one. But it really matters how easy it is to get to those 12+ charge counters. And I think because of the way this works with Similacrum Synthesizer, I think the Synthesizer can get it done pretty efficiently because of the huge bodies that Synthesizer can make. So I'm tempted to think this could be the better one. Then again, you could run the 𝔼𝔻𝔼ℝ Academy one in a Similacrum Synthesizer deck as well. Maybe you run both of these in that deck. I don't know. All I know is that Synthesizer is going to be running roughshod all over the standard meta after this set rotates in, and it's going to be wild, guys. I hope you're ready for it. But that's going to do it for today's video. We'll be back tomorrow with another update with all of the spoilers that drop tomorrow, so look forward to that. And God forbid there's another leak, we will cover the leak. I don't think there's going to be another leak. At the same time, I've said that like 3 or 4 times already, and then there always is another leak. So if there is, we'll try to cover that stuff immediately, maybe earlier in the day. And no matter what, we're going to be back tomorrow with our daily spoilers, covering everything that's officially spoiled. So look forward to that. Check out the spoiler playlist that's linked in the description and in a pinned comment, because everything we've covered so far, even the stuff that's not official that a lot of content creators aren't going over, the leaked stuff, all of that's in the playlist. So check that stuff out. Like, subscribe, do the thing. I appreciate the hell out of you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck text, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.